The range of animals possessing a pleasure center is already broad enough to allow the generalization that it is a property built into all vertebrate brains, although I haven't found reference yet to reptiles. Nor do I know whether invertebrates have been excluded. I do hope someone is trying it out in lobsters and limulus. If I could just read somewhere that aplysia has a string of neurons yielding pleasure, or that an earthworm or a Drosophila can be induced to stimulate a particular set of ganglia, I would organize brass bands everywhere for dancing in all the streets of the world until I ran out of money. I like to think that it is precisely because of the existence of loose-minded people like me that the neurobiologists have gone carefully with this problem. That, and perhaps also because of their hunch that this time they were onto something with very few, if any, imaginable applications for practical use. Interesting, perhaps, a nice model for studying psychopharmacology. What drugs will enhance, which ones suppress the pleasure response. But something to go carefully with, maybe even something a bit scary. John Lilly pounding electrodes into the head of a dolphin. Robert Heath with his schizophrenic patients bristling with implants back in the 1950s and 60s. Better play it quiet. So the work went on with some intensity in the 1970s, mostly in rats and monkeys, but low-keyed. The term pleasure center was dropped by mutual consent all around. It no longer turns up in any of the neuroscience publications, nor in the Index Medicus. Once in a while it is mentioned in a historical review, but with deprecating remarks about the folly of anthropomorphizing. Whatever it is that goes on in the brain of a rat cannot be interpreted as having any meaning whatever for the human mind of man. Instead of pleasure or pleasure center or pleasure stimulation, the phenomenon is now referred to in all the articles as ICSS. If you want to find it, look in the index under intracranial self-stimulation. ICSS, that's all it is. In the September 21st, 1984 issue of Science, a remarkable issue devoted entirely to papers on the present status and future prospects of neurobiology, there is no mention of it. Maybe it will vanish at last into the literature, reappearing from time to time or glimpsed, staring from an attic window like a mad cousin of neurobiology, a sort of unaccountable embarrassment to the field. Or maybe it will suddenly catch fire again from a new idea and consume everyone's attention for another 30 years. Right now, though, it seems to be in the doldrums. A recent lively paper from the University of Pennsylvania describes an automated computerized apparatus for analyzing a rat's behavior under ICSS around the clock, distinguishing quantitatively between the degrees of reward and other factors affecting the rat's behavior. Perhaps something like this will start things up again. Meanwhile, it seems to me that the phenomenon has been laid in front of us as a free gift, taken as far as it can be taken by skilled reductionist research, resting there for the mind's eye, free game for speculation by any interested party, including me. Personally, I like it this way. I'm just as glad that the problem is stuck for the time anyway, not likely to be swept along and explained away in the near future. I prefer that. For it has raised, it seems to me, one of the loveliest of all the possibilities raised by biological science and memory. Maybe the loveliest of all, considering the way most of us tend to look at nature and her works these days. Namely, there is such a thing as pure pleasure, and there is a mechanism for mediating it alive in our brains. And not just our superior world-class super primate human brains, but perhaps in all kinds of brains. Granted, this is a distorting, terribly unnatural, fundamentally misleading way for it to be revealed to us by so artifactual a system for demonstrating its existence. There is something distasteful, even nasty, about viewing a rat nearly killing himself by stimulating a part of his brain that gives him ineffable pleasure. But past that, and think of what lies behind these experiments, what has really been revealed. There is at least one tract, probably more, connected to many different parts of the brain whose function is to convey pleasure. Pleasure in what? Is it simply built in, an autonomous mechanism deep in the brain, running on its own, always switched on, reaching consciousness only when other noises are shut off? Or does it depend for its sources on firing of receptors connected to the world outside the brain like most other events in the central nervous system? Is it a sense of reward only turned on by some special kind of news from outside? Not hunger or thirst, not pain or the relief of pain, not touch or proprioception, nothing to do with vision or sound, not sex, not domination, not territory, not language or song of any kind of sound. Only something giving silent pleasure. What could it be then, this news that is constantly streaming into the central nervous system of all animals, traveling the right track, finding the right receptors, and sent along in relays of the same news to the limbic system and up into the frontal lobe, spreading, so to speak, the news around? It must be something important, signifying something we need to have signified for our satisfaction in life. I have a vote in this, and I vote for living. I suggest that the medial forebrain bundle carries the impulses coming in from cells all over the body, bearing the news that they are alive. Simple as that. I insert this notion here not in order to gain priority and win a prize for myself, but because in the blessed lull of the research in its present phase, I can stick the idea in before it is snatched away and destroyed by the forward progress of science. The sense of being alive should exist, even if it proves not to when the work has moved further along. Pleasure in being alive ought to exist as a special, independent, autonomous sense. If I had the responsibility for putting together a closed ecosystem as huge as the one on this planet, with the intention of having it persist and survive by evolution, I would put this one property in at the very beginning, along with ribosomes and cell membranes, as a basic property of everything alive, excluding it from natural selection and any sort of competition, violating all the rules, but never mind. Never mind the rules in this single case. Make an exception here, allow for the pure fun that ravens have swooping down in the winds along the sides of mountain cliffs, allow for what cats do when not busy with serious cat business. Make a provision for humans, especially young children, playing, but in a mechanism that can handle the inside of the messages conveyed both by the 14th quartet and the 4th movement of the Missa Solemnis, where the violin and the human voice suddenly turn into a single voice and install the receptor for that word and that line of that poem, that jolt of that image. Take into account the need of an organism to know for sure that it is alive. In short, make the game worth playing for all the players. Come to think of it, I hope the work on ICSS doesn't move from where it now stands. It is exactly the right piece of scientific information just where it is now in this part of this century. Don't, for heaven's sake, move it. Just leave it there for thinking about. And don't talk to me about cocaine or amphetamine or the other pharmacological tricks that may have come into fashion for artificially switching on the pleasure mechanism. I doubt that they or any other artificial devices can really switch on something as fundamental as this. It is more likely always running, always switched on. If drugs are indeed involved, as indeed they may be, they are meddling with it, disturbing its true function out of reality, in a sense tormenting it as Old's electrodes were really tormenting the medial forebrain bundle. James Thurber had it right. Let your mind alone. Perhaps the best way to feel the pleasure, if you're willing to make the sacrifice, is to shut down most of what you usually keep your mind doing in order to get through the day. Charles Darwin must have caught a glimpse of this late in his day when he wrote his saddest words. Now for many years I cannot endure to read a line of poetry. I have also almost lost my taste for pictures or music. My mind seems to have become a kind of machine for grinding general laws out of a large collection of facts. The loss of those tastes is a loss of happiness. Technically, Darwin may have been suffering from an overfunctioning of the gate control system for modulating incoming sensory information. But Darwin's medial forebrain bundle had worked wonderfully well earlier in his life. In an 1858 letter to his wife Emma, he wrote, "I fell asleep in the grass and awoke with a chorus of birds singing around me and squirrels running up the trees. and I did not care one penny how the beasts or birds had been formed. It may be that if he had not had his own mechanism for inner pleasure tuned up and working to perfection early in his life, we might never have had the origin of species. Indeed, if it were not for the medial forebrain bundle and the messages carried along its fibers, whatever they are, we might never have become the species we hope to be.